Welcome to Those Guys Sports. It is your boy Mike, and I have a special guest with me today. I have the writer of the Raptors.com, a guy that a lot of people may not know is also writing about cricket. So if you're interested in cricket, make sure you follow this man. You'll hear him on the Raptors podcast on Sportsnet with William Liu. You'll hear him on Locked On with Sean Woodley, Vivek Jacobs. I don't know him that well to call him Big V yet. Hopefully, eventually, I can call him Big V. Not yet, right now. I gotta earn that. But this is Vivek Jacobs. Like I said, writer extraordinaire of Raptors.com. How are you, Vivek?
I'm doing great. Thank you for that wonderful intro, Michael. And yeah, I'm excited to talk hoops and whatever else you got in mind.
Yeah, so hoops. The thing is, it's funny, like with the Raptors, they're not in the playoffs, and I feel like Raptor fans have so much to talk about. Like sometimes I like when they're not in the playoffs because then my heart's not
Yeah.
breaking. I don't have anxiety for the whole day about what's about to go down. So it's kind of good when the Raptors are in the playoffs, even though I would rather them, of course, be
There's
in
no
it.
stress.
No stress. But I think to myself, imagine if they had Miami Heat's position. Would the same fate be following them? I don't know. It's one of those things like a pipe dream, they would say.
Yeah.
I don't want to have
They don't
that
got a
pipe.
guy named Jimmy Butler.
They do, and we'll talk about what the Raptors need because we both know the Raptors need a lot of players. But I'll start with like you were around the team for so long, you wrote about them and everything. What would you say was like the biggest problem? I know it's vague, but what would you say the biggest problem was?
I think the biggest problem was like just complete disconnectedness over the course of the season, right? And like when Masai is talking about seeing the team and not enjoying watching them play and calling them selfish when, you see great individual performances, but it doesn't necessarily translate to wins. I think all those types of things, uh, I keep going back to it. Like when you enjoyed watching the Raptors over the past decade, when you watch them at their best, it was because the whole was greater than the sum of its parts,
Right.
and that was completely absent this season. And so I think that's the biggest thing to me. They need to get back to just playing like pure team ball. And even when Kawhi was here, like that was a very unselfish team, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, you knew the pecking order, Kawhi's at the top, and it all goes down from there. But in terms of the style of play, it was very team oriented, right?
Right. Yeah, and then it's funny because I was listening to Will Lou talk to Gary Trent Sr. and he talked about selfishness. Like he kept banking on the fact that this team was different. It's like they would drive down the lane, they'll see a guy on the corner where they wouldn't pass it to them. They'd almost
Yeah.
force their shot. So there was, and it seems to be like there was and I think we all felt it, like just watching them, that this team was so different. Like it's like they didn't want to see each other improve, but it's like individually, like Pascal technically had his best season he's ever had. OG had a pretty good season individually. A guy that we
Yeah.
talked about, defensive player of the year. Fred, the one down, I would say like not as much as the great of everyone else. Gary, from his dad said he had a pretty good season. I think a lot of us would differ, but
Yeah.
in saying that, it's like as you spoke about, like the issue was the selfishness, and what do you think like the best way to cure that? Is it just a team talking to each other better, them kind of realizing their roles?
Yeah, I think better structure for sure. I think Nick Nurse as a coach is definitely more suited to an older team, a more, a veteran crew that like can manage themselves.
Right.
And that's why, whenever I've had conversations with him about the offense, like I've specifically asked him about, hey, like, does the team like need a hierarchy? And he's like, no, I think one of the great things about our team is like anyone can go off for like 25 or 30 or whatever, right?
Right.
And then you just kind of play off that. But I think with a young team, especially when you've got a situation like this year where you've got, Pascal in a situation where he's on some level, not saying it's the first thing he thinks about, but on some level, he's aware that if he makes an all NBA, he's eligible for a supermax.
He knows he has to be thinking about it in the back of his head. There's $30 million like around the corner if I do this.
Right. You've got Scotty Barnes saying, "Hey, I was the rookie of the year. I want to show, you know, that
Right.
I'm going to build on that." You've got OG Anunoby, who's wanted a bigger role in the offense.
Right.
You've got Fred VanVleet coming off an all-star year and now going into free agency. So you've got all these individual goals that I think that's where structure matters. And I think that's a word that was used by Masai, that was used even by Fred, saying that the offense needs some structure and this and that. So I think that's something that needs to happen. And then, in terms of selfishness, I think you saw that on the defensive end as well.
Mhm.
It's not just about what happens like when you're on the offensive side of the ball, where, for example, one of the great things we appreciated about the Raptors defense when they were at their best was we know how they scramble, but it was like, okay, the help is going to be there, and then the help for the helper is going to be there. And this year, how many times did you see it was like one blow by
Everyone's
and no
watching.
one's helping?
Yeah, everyone's watching. I thought you had it. No, I
Yeah.
don't.
And then it's like, no, you know what? That was his bad. He shouldn't have got blown by. It's stuff like that.
Right.
That's where it's like no one wants to look bad, Like people usually you see business decisions made when you're about to get dunked on, but here
Yeah.
business decisions were being made in terms of like I don't want to look like I let my man score. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think it kind of also falls with like expectations. So I know all of us had high expectations of this team. The one guy that I weirdly had no expectations for was Scotty, because I always knew he was going to be a project in that sense. Like him winning rookie of the year was like this year. Like he I didn't think he was gonna have. I didn't know he was gonna have such a great first year. I thought his second year would be better, but because he had such a good first year, I didn't expect his second year to be as good because our expectations just can't be that high. But I know as Raptor fans, we do get kind of like giddy when we see someone act this way. And then when we didn't see it, we thought he had a down year. But the one thing with Scotty that I wanted to kind of speak of was his energy, right? Because I feel like when Scotty had a lot of energy, this team won. And I don't think he's gonna be this Giannis that we kind of want him to be. I kind of feel he could be a better shooting version of Draymond or like Ben Simmons. But what can you say about Scotty's energy throughout the season?
Yeah, I think it came in waves, and I think that earlier on in the season it was kind of like he wanted to show that, hey, this is who I was in my rookie season. I want to
Mhm.
show that I've added different stuff to my game. And that's why you saw all these like pull-up jumpers, right? And whether it was mid-range, whether it was a three ball, and he was like trying to do all these different things. And I think when he really settled down was when it was kind of like, okay, that stuff is really not happening for me. Maybe I need just a whole lot more work in that, and I'm just gonna kind of go back to being what I was.
Right.
And I think he was at his very best when, he's in the paint, constantly probing, constantly attacking, and then just playing off of that. It's like, hey, if I can play a bit of bully ball here and score, I'll do that. If not, if there's an open teammate, I know I can find them. So I think stuff like that. Once he went back to doing what he does best, then things kind of normalized for him.
Yeah, and I saw that too. When he got because he's so young, right? Like, so he has to really develop his game. It's not a one day. It's not a. It's almost like 1 day at a time. It's not gonna be a year at a time. He has to slowly develop. But I think a lot of people like Anthony Edwards had a weird second season where even Evan Mobley, who everyone kind of wants to know as this next Tim Duncan, but he still didn't have the greatest season overall. He has some, of course, great defensive moments. But other than that, like he wasn't this offensive hub that people thought he could be like a Tim Duncan. So I think it's just kind of like patience. And I think, someone who also shows that as like OG. OG, we have to be a lot of really patient with. But something I sent you right before, I like OG. I'm not gonna ever say I don't like OG. So it may
Yeah.
sound weird. But don't you feel, or like what do you think with my statement here? He is not overrated by any means. But like the dream of OG becoming a Kawhi or a Paul George or like I don't know. I'm trying to think of someone less, but honestly, like I used to think OG was better
Yeah, you
than
mentioned
Mikal
Mikal
Bridges.
Bridges.
Right. Like I think he's better than Mikal Bridges defensively, but what we saw the last like 4 weeks, like 5 weeks of Mikal Bridges, I don't think OG can do that.
Right.
Like, what do you think? Do you think OG still has that ceiling, or should we kind of just to temper our thoughts and say like this is who he is.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you in the sense that like I don't think he can be that Mikal Bridges type where like the big thing with Bridges is his ability to shoot off the pull up, right?
He's
Like
so good.
yeah, and like he's showing that shot creation ability now, but with OG, I think it's primarily catch and shoot. I think there's definitely like mismatch opportunities where like he can play a bit of bully ball or like obviously he attacks closeouts really well, and those are like his best avenues, but I don't think he's shown enough with the handle. I don't think he's shown enough with like recognizing um where help is coming from, and some people will argue he just needs the reps in that regard, um which will be true to an extent, but I also think that this current version of OG Anunoby is a very, very good player.
The
Like we
perfect
can just
version.
appreciate him for who he is right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
and that's cool.
But
Like
I wonder, is it him that like? Obviously, I think every player wants to be Michael Jordan or LeBron, but like I almost want to question him in a sense like, does he think that he is that next Kawhi or Paul George, or does he feel like he can be exceptional in his role? Because everyone has that trade package of OG going to a team for like 3 to 4 draft picks, but ultimately he's going to be the same player if he goes to the Grizzlies or anywhere else.
right. So I think that's the human side where it's perfectly normal for a 25-year-old, he'll be 26 in July,
Mhm.
to think that he can accomplish so much more, right? Like
Yeah.
you would think there's almost something wrong if he didn't think that at
Right,
age
right,
25, age
right,
26, right?
right.
You almost wouldn't want that type of player, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're just like, yeah, this is who I am, this is all I can be, you'd be like,
He's too
you know,
complacent.
yeah, exactly, right? So I think he's perfectly right to want to be more. And that's where the front office has kind of got to manage their expectation of what they see, what they think his ceiling is with, hey, OG, like you could potentially put yourself in maybe a Jeremy Grant situation where you were with a great team in Denver that is looking very much like a serious title
No
contender right now,
one's talking about them.
but you wanted your own thing, and then you ended up in Detroit.
Didn't become
And
an all-star. Nothing really came up.
yeah, so you got more of a bag, sure, but like, you know, you were exposed. Like now people definitively look at you like he's absolutely not that dude, right?
At all. At all.
And he goes to Portland. He had a good season individually,
Yeah.
but the team wasn't winning, right?
Right.
Or not at a high enough clip anyway, right?
Right.
So I think that's kind of maybe, with OG, that's how he's maybe got to look at it a little bit and understand that the grass isn't always greener.
Right.
And I think he's got a good thing going here in Toronto. If he did still want to explore that for himself, and at the end of the day, some players and frankly anyone in life on some level will be like, hey, I'd rather know than just be wondering what if, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so if that's something that he really, really just wants to have the opportunity, and whatever comes of it, that he's entitled to do that, then that'll be the conversation with the front office and you go from there. But
Right.
I personally think he's got a great thing going here. Um and probably the big argument from this season in his favor is probably like, hey, if I'm only going to win 41 games
Why
and
not
not
try
make the
something else?
playoffs,
Yeah.
why not have a bigger role somewhere else?
Which is true, right? And like we said, like we both agree he's perfect. Like he's perfect for like what a great defender can give you 16 to 18 points a game. Like he can give it all. He's not like a PJ Tucker's older now, but he's not giving you 0 points. He's playing tough defense. He can guard Jokic, and then he can also guard LeBron or guard John Morant. Like he has the versatility to kind of guard multiple people. And you're kind of like, you're right. He's only 25, 26. So why would he say like my only stop gap is this, like I'm only this, like no, let me develop my game and become something different. Another guy I wanted to mention, I want to talk about Nick Nurse, but the one guy I want to mention before is Precious Achua. For some reason, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I'm starting to hear a little bit more now. I kind of think he should have been given more blame. And and I know he got injured at one point, but we had so much expectations. But a lot of that fell on the growth of Pascal, of course, the growth of some of the young guys, but really like Precious Achua and Scotty Barnes. We're like those two guys are our future. Well, Chu is only 23. We're thinking this guy is. Some people thought he was our center of our future, but realizing that he's not. But don't you feel like we should, of course, like logically point that finger and be like, hey, like you didn't play that well.
Yeah, I think, you know, we gave him the benefit of the doubt after he had the ankle injury.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously he needed some time to work his way back.
Mm-hmm.
But then, when he had the stretch where he was in the starting lineup for OG and playing well,
Yeah.
and then went to the bench after OG came back and then just completely fell off the map, that was concerning, right? That was like, hey, what happened here? Like, you were balling out in that starting lineup. Like, bring that same energy, bring that same intensity. And you could see his confidence just like completely fall off a cliff, right? Like, when you watch Precious Achua a season ago,
Right.
whether it was for better or worse, he was going at it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. He didn't care. He's doing it.
Yeah,
I always think he's
whatever
like normal.
whatever the
He's like
results
normal.
were, he was coming at you,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's why he eventually got to where he did and
Right.
had that super strong finish. And so I think when he struggled the way he did and continued to like take away from his confidence and he was just like being more and more timid, I think that was something that I looked at and was like, man, this guy just needs a reset in the worst way. Like, go into the off season, put in your work again, start fresh. Um, I wonder how much the relationship with Nick Nurse tapered off just because of that back and forth. Like, you're a starter, you're a bench player. We need you to do this. We need you to do that. You could get that sense that there was frustration for him.
Yeah.
Just, whether it was with his own play, whether it was with the opportunities he was getting, all of that combined. So I am looking forward to him just, kind of having that fresh start, clean slate, and hopefully come back next season and have the season that many people were expecting this year.
And you had mentioned Nick Nurse, and that was the next thing I wanted to talk about. So, like with Nick Nurse, it's weird. I feel like lately everyone kind of has a little bit more of a disdain for Nick Nurse. Like we all say he was the greatest Raptors coach of all time, but a lot of people are talking about him more negatively. And like the one thing that I made like a video like years ago when he first got hired as a coach, I think it was his first press conference. He called out DeMar immediately. Called DeMar out, said he needs to play defense or he's not going to play on the team. This year, calls almost everybody out. Boucher, Gary Trent Jr., Achua, sometimes Pascal, and obviously, I think it we're thin. Like I think that's half the reason why he didn't continue with the Raptors. But do you think, and kind of being around the team, did you see that disdain from the team? Like, do you feel like they kind of disconnected from him at one point?
I had my own inklings that like there was a bit of a gap.
Yeah,
Um, I'll be honest, there's only so much I can say, like
of
working
course,
for
of course,
Raptors.com.
of course, of course, of course, of course. Company
But
man, of course. I gotta make it.
but I think, you know, uh, the best way I can put it is this: like, you have to adjust to the times.
Mhm.
And I think when you've got such a young team, you've got to understand the optics of all of this stuff, right? And like, optics just in general plays a big part uh in how you manage relationships right now. And so I think if he were to have a private conversation first with a player, and then it's like, okay, I had the conversation, he's still not doing it, I'm going to have another conversation, oh, okay, he's still not doing it, and then you air it out publicly,
Right,
then to me that's fair game.
right,
You've had the conversations, right? But I think when you go straight to the public with it, then it's like you definitely erode that bond in the locker room, right? Like, I think having that locker room feel like a sacred place, having it feel like a safe space, having it feel like, it's genuinely us against them. Um, I think you erode that when you're almost like being more honest with the media at times than you are with your own players, like on a one-on-one basis.
So, with Nick Nurse gone, and it's gonna be hard because I think Masai has multiple thought processes. I really think that he wants to go all in, but he's either gonna go all in or he's gonna trade everyone, right? Like I don't think he of course I think most GMs don't want to be in the middle. They're not satisfied with being in the middle, but it's like he's waiting for that player that potentially Karl Anthony Towns or a Trey Young to be like, I don't want to be here anymore to make that move. Do you kind of see Masai trying to figure that's like his next move, trying to figure that out, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think when you look at the success they had in getting to that championship team, it was very much like, hey, let's be very, very good and build and build and build. So when the moment presents itself, when the opportunity presents itself, we're ready. Right. And I think that's where you bank on internal development, right? And you have players develop to a point. Like think about what DeMar was when he first came in the league,
Right,
and think about that player getting to a point where he was good enough to get traded for Kawhi Leonard,
right, right, right,
right? You think about uh like that's where asset management in general has been a huge success of the front office until after the championship, right?
right,
Like they turned over DeMar into Kawhi. They turned over Terrence Ross into Serge Ibaka. They turned over, even more recently, like you were about to lose Norman Powell because you weren't going to pay him what he ended up getting in free agency. And you turned him into Gary Trent Jr. and like kick the can further down the line. We'll see what happens in free agency this time around. Right. And so being able to turn the roster over in that way and get to a position where you're like, okay, now we have the pieces to really make a move. That proved successful for them in the past. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking for something similar now too.
right. And I think that you can tell that even in Masai's like press conference, he brought up Malachi Flynn, he brought up all other young guys, and you can tell that like he wants to still develop Jeff Downing Jr. Like he mentioned these guys by name, Donald Banton, and I think because you're right, I think he wants to develop the young guys, then make the moves. People for Serge Ibaka is not a homegrown talent. Marc Gasol is not homegrown. We traded JV, one of my favorite players of all time. We traded JV, right, for Marc Gasol to get over the top, right? Because they felt like they still needed that guy. They needed that extra punch. Even PJ Tucker
And
got
DeLon Wright,
traded.
like
And
he
DeLon
was.
Wright, like, yeah, we traded a lot of people. I love Norm, so I'm always gonna think that this Norm trade wasn't the greatest because I love Norm, and when I saw him doing the playoffs, I just always believed that could have been Norm's ceiling. At one point, my Norm ceiling was like trade Demar right now, make Norm start. But good idea they didn't. But that was my crazy fanboy at the time. But yeah, like you can tell that Masai is really trying to do that. So I have some of my thoughts of what the Raptor team should do, and I want to ask you, but I want to first put your GM cap on. I know everyone's going to ask you, but today in May, um, it's going to probably change in August, or it'll change. But right now, what would you do if you're Masai and Bobby?
Yeah. So again, in maintaining that thinking about like turning the roster over and maintaining your assets, like I would look to resign all three of Fred, Gary, and Jakob Pertl. Because like two wrongs don't make a right. Like I think you've created a lot of holes with your roster construction, but that doesn't mean you let go of players for nothing.
Right,
And so even if I don't view Gary Trent Jr. as a long-term piece, or Fred or Yak, whatever it may be, however you view the roster, you want to make sure that when they move on, you're getting something in return. And so that's where I look at it and say, okay, at this point, you're in a position where you have to bite the bullet, because it would be an absolute nightmare scenario if Fred VanVleet, who's been an all-star, is a good player and he just walks for nothing.
right,
And you've already got like no guard depth.
right,
So I think that would be the absolute nightmare. So you have to avoid that. You have to resign him. Jakob Pertl, obviously, you don't give up a first round pick that's only top 6 protected to not re-sign that guy. So you
You
got to
want to be
bring
good.
him back.
You want to be good.
Yeah. Gary Trent Jr. is the only one that's debatable. But again, I would lean towards, trying to get something for him at the trade deadline.
Right.
Worst comes to worst, depending on what a sign and trade looks like, what you're getting back, that might be worth it too. But that's pretty much how I'd attack the free agency. And then, obviously, if you re-sign those guys, you're committed to keeping them for the next 6 months.
Right.
And then I would send feelers out on Pascal Siakam, and I would see, yeah, I love Pascal, but I think the reality is such, and people are going to call me crazy for saying this, but I would send feelers out on Pascal. I would send feelers out on Scotty.
Really? Scotty too.
I would see what the return looks like.
Yeah.
Because for me, as much as like Pascal and Scotty can play together, I don't view Pascal, Scotty, and Jakob as a long-term front court fit.
It can. They need a if you keep Pascal and Scotty, you need a shooter as a big.
Yeah,
You need
exactly.
Brook Lopez.
Yeah. And that's where, as good as Jakob Poeltl has been in the starting lineup and the net rating has been what it has, and he's been very good. For that front court, I did not view Jakob Poeltl as an ideal signing.
Right.
Like when Masai says Jakob Poeltl is a top 10 center, I think he can be a top 10 center with a differently constructed team.
Right.
So for me, that's where I'm sending the feelers out, because I think the main thing with picking a direction right now is figuring out, hey, are you continuing to build alongside Fred and Pascal and that older group?
Right.
Or are you shifting towards Scotty and OG
Right.
and Precious and, Koloko, and like building with that, right?
Right.
And so I'm just sending out feelers on Pascal and Scotty, seeing what each conversation looks like, what that return looks like, and then going from there. I'm not saying I'm committing to one way or the other, but it's like, hey, if this really puts me in a position that has the roster making much more sense,
Right.
right? Like, say, hypothetically, right? We brought up the name Mikal Bridges,
Yeah.
right? Think about a starting lineup, and in terms of the sense it makes, if it was Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Pascal Siakam, Jakob Poeltl, and then whatever other piece you're taking from Brooklyn to come off the bench. To
See,
me,
that's pretty good.
functionally,
Yeah,
that works better.
it does.
You could say the same thing if it's Fred, OG, Scotty, Mikal Bridges, and Jakob Poeltl, right?
Right.
I think I'm just trying to change the functionality of the team, because I just don't think this works. Like, look at all the 3-point shooting in the league right now,
So much.
right? And it's like the Raptors keep, they're just shooting themselves in the foot.
Right.
Like, you got Fred, you got Gary, you got OG. Those are the 3
That's it.
shooters you have. That's it. And that's why every time like one of them is missing, it creates so much more pressure, right? And you're
Right.
almost like, man, and Pascal hit like 4 or 5 threes today, like,
Yeah.
or like, even when Fred has a bad shooting night, it's like, it's super frustrating when he does, but at the same time, it's like he has to keep shooting.
Who else is shooting? Who
Like,
else is
he
shooting the
has to
threes?
go like 10, 15 3-point attempts, because
Right.
it's like that's all you got in terms of
Right.
getting those 3-point looks up, right?
Right.
So for me, I'm definitely looking to change like how functional the roster is. And so, I have like, basically with Scotty, is there a version of a deal that almost in spirit is similar to what the Kings did when they traded Tyrese Halliburton and got Sabonis?
See, you're correct. That's very correct. Because if you can get something like a Sabonis level player, which almost leads to like what I've said the Raptors need, like I think the Raptors need a Chris Middleton type. The way I see with the Raptors, it's like because I fully feel like any NBA team has organization. Like you have who is your number one guy. It doesn't have to be your number one scorer, but you have your number one guy. So I think about Giannis, number one guy. Everyone knows MVP. That's your guy. Then you have the guy in the last 5 minutes. That is Middleton. Look at Denver, and I will talk about Denver. But you have Jokic, who's your number one MVP, and he will. He's one of the most clutch guys in the last 5 minutes. He's one of the most guys. But Jamal Murray is the guy you kind of want to, break down the defense. That's the guy you're looking for. So even like Anthony Davis and LeBron, LeBron's the better guy to do it. But when LeBron had Kyrie, Kyrie is the better guy to break down the defense. So sometimes it's like you need that person who Pascal, in my thought, can give the ball to and be like, okay, create, do something for us last 5 minutes. And I feel like that's one of the biggest things the Raptors are missing. So it kind of goes back to what you're saying. If you can call some teams and be like, hey, I have Scotty. Are you willing to give up? I wouldn't want this guy, but I hear people talk about Trey Young. I would never want Trey Young. I'm not gonna. I would never want him. But what I understand of Trey Young on this specific team, I would get it. I would understand it a
Right.
lot. If he had a Pascal, an OG, even Precious, like you have all these wings around him, kind of what he has now. But Pascal's a better player than DeJounte Murray by a lot. So it's like something that could help them out a lot if they had a player as such, or I don't know if there's like a type of wing. It's almost weird, like almost a Jeremy Grant type, but like probably a little bit better offensively, but something like that.
Yeah.
What do
Yeah.
you think?
I mean, I think I'd probably like, would you put Bridges a tier above Jeremy Grant?
Yeah, I
Or
would.
would you say they're the same?
Nah, he's better.
He's better,
He's
right?
better. Overall,
So
better
like
defender.
I would want someone like in that tier.
Right.
Um plus like say for example, if it was Bridges, I would probably want like Bridges and Dinwiddie. Um
Yeah.
something like that,
Man.
right? Maybe there's a pick involved, who knows? Like I'm just spitballing right now.
Right.
But something like that would make sense to me where I look at the roster. It's like, okay, you've added that guard depth, you've improved the 3-point shooting, you've got OG and Bridges together defensively now. Like,
Pascal like has been a really good defender, but I think it happens with everyone. The better they get offensively, the worse they technically get defensively. So like it would make
yeah,
him better because he has two guys, and if you have still Yak behind you, you're still pretty good.
yeah. So, so that's where I look at the functionality. I look at, that long-term outlook of Scotty versus like what the team could become right now, which one's better, like all that obviously depends on, what you view Scotty's ceiling as, right? Like, do you view him as a multi-time all-star, or do you view him as like a multi-time all-NBA-er, right?
Right,
Or do you view him as a Hall of Famer,
right,
right?
right.
So where you fall on the spectrum of that will obviously impact whether you agree or disagree on like what's a suitable trade package for him right now. I
Yeah,
probably, you know, if someone were to say, oh, over under like 1.5 all NBA teams, I still lean towards yes.
yeah. It's hard because the,
But
the the forward position. But yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it's possible.
over the course of his career. And so, yeah, you're kind of evaluating. Like last year, if you would have asked people about Scotty, there would have been like, yeah, no question, he is going to be all that, right?
Yeah, Hall of
And
Famer,
so,
All NBA, the number one guy on the championship team, easily.
yeah, everything, right?
Yeah,
So now this year you kind of scale it back a little bit. And so I think that debate gets interesting, but again, where you fall on what's a suitable trade package and what you would do, what you wouldn't do, that's all subjective.
right. And I think if you go the opposite end and you do focus on the youth movement with Scotty at the helm, of course, the team you're calling is Portland. I would say Portland as one of the main teams you call. But if they're not giving you Shaden Sharp, like you don't need Anthony Simons. Anthony Simons, no. You call for Shaden Sharp. You're like, I want that guy. I want the young 20-year-old who can potentially be the number one guy on the team. Like I'm looking for that to pair with a Scotty. Other times I
Right.
think of like Pascal to potential suitors. It all depends on the young talent you're gonna get back because you want a lot of young talent to for the future and kind of build around these two stars that you may have. And so that's something that I would want to see. But I think also it falls with the coaching, right? All depends on who you get. Because I'm thinking if the Raptors did get Udoka, I would find, even though it's weird that he did join Houston, I'd find it hard to believe that he would want to be with a team who would want development. But he did join the worst team in the league. But then I guess he just feels like that's a easier path for development. But I don't know. With the coaching search, what type of would it
I mean,
really
I think
depend
he
on what type
also
of
just
coach?
wanted a situation where, it wouldn't be a heavy spotlight.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's true. No one's gonna talk to him in Houston at all. In Toronto, he would definitely get the spotlight, especially with his past things that he's done, breaking the heart of Nia Long, which is a crime within itself. So he shouldn't do
100%.
such things. But yeah, like it's weird. So don't you feel like wherever Masai kind of goes or goes with the coach, then we kind of know what path he maybe wanted to take?
Uh, I think based on what he said, obviously, he's looking to shift the culture back towards, being team oriented, playing unselfish, that type of stuff. As far as like rebuilding the roster, he did accept that the 3-point shooting needs to be addressed.
Right.
Um, I think with guys like Malachi and Delano, just the younger guys in general, I got the sense that he feels he didn't learn what he needed to these last couple of seasons, and they didn't get enough opportunity for him to like properly evaluate. And now this next season is going to be interesting in terms of uh you know hey, was Nick Nurse right to just not play those guys because they weren't good enough, or did you just need a different voice who manages them better and gets the best out of them, right? And
Right.
so I think he is gonna look to see what he has in those like development prospects. And then I don't think he will look to make a major move. I think the coaching change is what he looks at as his major move.
I agree because like I actually when I was into Masai's presser, I'm like, you know what? The one thing I wasn't the biggest fan of Nick Nurse is that this season Delano Banton had 27 points to like 9 and a 5, like in one of the games. The next game, I don't believe he played more than 20 minutes. And
Yeah.
like just little things like that, I'm like, why would anyone feel confident if you give them 20 minutes and then 2 minutes? Like you said with Pressure Achua, it obviously started because probably someone was missing, then he goes off the bench, but you only get like 5 minutes off the bench. So you're not really doing much off the bench. So you're thinking to yourself, like, there's so much ways that the curve goes up and down with their minutes. So I can see why these guys, are kind of like, I don't want to be here if I'm not going to get these minutes. I don't want to play like you. You just never feel like your role is truly defined. I think at one point it has to be defined. I think it was Fred that said like all this. We're all gonna get touches and all this type of offense, or we're gonna play this radical defense. No, we have to stop it. It has to be more organized. And I agree with that completely. You have to say Pascal's going to shoot 20 times a game. This is how much you're going to shoot. This is how much you're going to shoot. And that's how we're going to talk about it, you know? So I think that's something that they had to do. The one thing I feel like if you're going to run it back, and I kind of think we're heading that way, which is weird. I think a lot of Raptor fans are like, they want to see a lot of change, but I kind of feel like they're in that path of like, I'm okay with keeping the same guys. I'm okay with keeping them. I think this team just had a bad season. I don't think they're a bad team. They had a really bad season with a lot of selfishness, a lot of unknowing of their role. But the one thing I would want to see is Scotty be like 50% of the time the point guard. Give him the reins. Let Fred be the shooting guard like he was with Kyle. And I agree with you. Let him shoot like 12 threes a game. One game he'll be 4 of 12, another game he'll be 8 of 12 or 1 of 12. You never know. But when you have those, it's going to still average out to like 40%.
And
What do
OG
you
should
think?
take more threes too. Like I think he's
Yeah,
gonna average like 5.5 threes a game this season. Like he should
right,
absolutely be at 8+ threes a game.
right. And then I think like with Pascal, it's weird. I think he should shoot less threes. Like I saw Pascal's trajectory. A lot of people, I think someone said baby Giannis. Okay, he's not Giannis at all. I think Pascal's like a Jimmy Butler in the sense of his development. Like every year he's grown, like even like a DeMar, every year they grow and they get like a certain bag. If you're really good at shooting the mid range, and I thought like Pascal was pretty good at the mid range this season, very consistent and very confident, perfect it. Perfect your mid range to like the highest degree that you can. And you know he's going to put in the work. I think he posted today that back to work. Okay. We all know Pascal's about to work on this. And if so, work on that. I personally don't care if he shoots threes. Like shoot one or two. Giannis stopped shooting threes at one point, and he has one of his best seasons of all time. So I just feel like if we kind of gave Scotty the reins, let like you said, OG shoot 8 times a game, let Gary shoot the three. Like it's kind of like if you're gonna use the same squad, exploit what they're good at.
You don't need to let Gary shoot. Like Gary will shoot for sure.
He will
You
shoot.
don't need to worry about giving Gary any kind of permission.
Yeah, he's gonna do it for sure. He's gonna do it. Yeah. So like, what do you think about giving Scotty like more of that point guard?
Yeah, and again, I think you know this is where, in terms of the direction of the team, it probably, if you want to go all in on Scotty and maximize what he can be as quickly as he can be that, then you probably do have to go younger, right? But I think if you're saying, hey, you want to like balance both development and winning, that's what this organization has done successfully for the past decade.
Right.
If you want to do both, then you kind of say, hey, okay, Scotty, like we're gonna let you add to this part of your game. If you show us that you've added that and you're able to pull it off in games successfully over a stretch, then hey, let's add something else. Let's go to the next thing and the next thing, and like slowly build that out that way, right? And I think the start of this season was probably too much of too many new things at the same time. And it's like, hey, let's just add like bit by bit and go from there, right? Like you don't need to show us that you're willing to pull up from three and the mid range, right?
Right. Right.
Like let's just slowly build out. And so, again, the off season, that was the first time he went through like an NBA player off season, right?
Right.
So he's gonna learn things from that. It's like, hey, how do I attack this better? How do I, actually get to a point where I know 100% I'm ready to pull this off, like in practice, and then from practice to a game.
Right. So like and I think that's where like Raptors, we can talk about it all day, but like this summer is going to be really good for them because we don't know what's going to happen. We can kind of figure out and take a step back and be like, you know what, this team's Pascal's good. He could have been an All NBA. If there was a fourth team, he's on it, right? If you didn't have to respect the Knicks so much, you probably would have put Pascal over Randall, but you had to give it Nick, and it couldn't be Brunson because all the guards this year. You have Scotty, who look at his numbers, pretty much the same as last year, but higher assist totals. And then you have Fred, who a lot of people are down on Fred, but like you said, who else is shooting it? You rather him shoot than a Boucher or Precious. So it's the roster construction that you really gotta take aim at. And then like OG, we at the beginning of the season, all DPOI. Everyone said defensive player of the year. That's who
Yeah,
he's gonna be. Of course, had injured, but still played, I think 67 games or something like that, which is a lot more than he's played in the past. I think it's his most, if I'm
right.
not mistaken. So like all these little things went well. It just seems like as a team, they just couldn't do it together. But you're hoping that it can. But to move on from the Raptors and talk about the NBA, I'm going to first talk about the thing that we just heard today about Dylan Brooks. I'm going to give you the floor. Whatever you want to say about Dylan Brooks, go ahead. It's your floor.
Yeah, look, Dylan, like if you want to talk your talk, that's fine. But when you get owned the way you do, you got to take it on the chin. You got to do those post-game media sessions. You got to acknowledge it. And then, pay your respects too, right? What's the first thing we usually hear from a team after they lose a series? Whether it's the head coach, whether it's the best player, like we just saw it, like the Kings and Warriors, they just went at it for 7 games.
Right.
Steve Kerr, before he takes questions, hey, much respect,
The
but
hell
it's
of a
like,
team
hey,
over there.
yeah, the Grizzlies put themselves in a situation where, you can't respect it.
Yeah.
You can't.
Wow.
So it's like, yeah, if you want to talk, go ahead and talk, right? And then how it plays out after that, you got to be able to take it either way,
Right.
right? It can't be like, oh, we won, so now I'm gonna stay on it. Oh, but we lost, so I'm just gonna duck media and everything, and
Right.
delete all the posts on my IG and just completely, ghost everyone, right? Like you can't have it both ways. And so, one saga man to another, like you got to step that up.
Yeah.
uh,
And that's the thing, right? And like I saw Perkins say this, and I kind of see what he's saying, that everyone's just using him as a scapegoat. Everyone's just using Dylan Brooks as a scapegoat. All of them had the attitude. All of them are cocky, which is true. I think they were all cocky. The Grizzlies were such. Last year, if you talked to us about the Grizzlies, we all loved them. This year, we're kind of like, who's this annoying kid that keeps like poking at me, right? And it sucks that they turn into like a baby to like a 3-year-old that's just like pounding on the floor every minute. But I kind of see what Kendrick was saying, that do you think we're kind of laying the blame more on Dylan?
no, I think it's more like it's been dragged out
Yeah.
because Dylan has not like just acknowledged it,
Yeah.
right? Like Ja was asked about, his comments about I'm fine in the West. And he was
He
like,
owned
yeah,
it.
I
Yeah.
said it. Now I got to take what comes with it. Right.
Yeah.
All right. There you go.
Like when you own
Just
it,
own it.
you're right. Yeah, you're right. When you own it, it's you just got to take it. And I don't think Dylan did. I think it's weird that they said that under no circumstances are we gonna bring him back. That seems like he was like the culture problem, and
Yeah.
I feel
That's
like,
the part I have a problem with. That's the
yeah, like
part
I feel like he was a
where,
part of the culture. Like you guys created
yeah.
this. I don't know why he's
Yeah.
back.
And you think about an example with Masai,
Right.
right? Like he flat out told Stanley Johnson, you are a bad basketball player.
Yeah. That's the
But did we
affirmation.
hear about that when it
No.
happened? When the
No.
Raptors let him go? Did we hear
Yeah.
anything about that? No. The first time we heard about it was when Stanley Johnson talked about it himself,
Right. Right.
right? So why are we seeing this tweet from Shams saying, hey, like I've never seen that before.
So early. So
I've
they
never
just got
seen that with
eliminated.
another player
Yeah, they just got
where a
eliminated.
team is just very clearly being like, hey, we are not, like publicly being like, hey, we are not bringing you back under any circumstance.
At all. At all. It's weird. And
And
things like Shams and Woj, they get some of they know these things prior to. But it seems like whoever in the Grizzly organization was like, no, you can tweet this right now. Like right
yeah,
now, tweet this out. That's just weird to me.
and I could see that it being more of like someone in ownership who like completely hates him
Yeah.
for what happened and how
Yeah.
things played out, as opposed to someone who is like the GM or whoever, because realistically you'd like to think they're at least like smart enough to try and keep his value to get like a sign and trade or something,
At least. At least.
right?
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, like if someone is able to like sit Dylan Brooks down and get it through to his head that he is not him
Right. Not.
and that you are a role player who can play very good defense,
Right.
and he can just like slowly just work his way back in terms of talking and all of that, right?
Right.
Like earn your respect, right? Like that's the thing. It's like you weren't even like talking smack to like D'Angelo Russell or like Austin Reeves or Dennis Schroeder, like you went for the king.
The guy who literally has the #1 points ever. Who are
And
you
listen,
talking to?
and like we saw on The Wire, if you come for the king, you
Yeah.
best not miss.
You better not miss. And
And all
that's
he
the
did
thing,
was
he makes
miss.
sense. And like, so now I'm very curious to see like who's gonna take him. Because like I just feel like the way it was stated, we're all like, oh, that seems really bad. Like, is he a culture? Like, does he do something bad with the culture? He probably cost himself like millions of dollars. He'd probably get like a 1-year contract. My assumption is that he'll probably get that. I'm not sure if the market's really gonna go well for him now.
Right. No, like, and from that standpoint, like, he should have recognized a while back that, like, yo, you were still, like, trying to earn your next contract.
Right, right, right,
Like, regardless of how the Grizzlies situation plays out, you want to make sure you're a presentable option for other teams.
right. Right.
And now you've really, really hurt that.
Right. He's heard it a lot, I believe. So very curious to see how that's going to turn out. Now, basically, Toronto down south is Miami Heat. That's how we're gonna like because they have our guy Kyle. They have Jimmy, who honestly has the approval rating of like the president, or over the president or the prime minister or whatever. Everyone loves Jimmy Butler. This team, we all probably believe is going to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. If they face Philadelphia, because the way Boston decides not to play some days, they can make it to the finals again. And I think a lot of us will be rooting for them. But what would you say about the Miami Heat? Like, what is it just luck or like is it just Miami Heat culture? The Heat culture, I should say.
Yeah, Heat culture is real for sure,
So
right? And like Jimmy with the Heat is the perfect marriage,
yeah,
right? Like every every bit of how he defines winning is exactly how Miami defines
right,
winning in terms of
right,
day-to-day approach, in terms of like how hard you play, all of that. They are perfectly in sync. It's
right.
the perfect marriage. Um, Now the reality is Giannis got hurt in game one
You did.
and missed 2 games after that, and that
Right.
played a factor. It wasn't the deciding factor because Giannis was there for those final 2 games, and they had a
Leads.
12-point lead with like 6 minutes left in game four, a
Yeah.
16-point lead going into the fourth. Um, and I think obviously there are criticisms to be made of Bud's coaching and how he managed the final stretch of those 2 games. I don't want to say too much because like when that news came out that his brother
Yeah.
was killed in a car accident,
It
like
changes everything.
I don't even like how
Right.
you I don't know even know how you focus on a game.
Right. Right.
So the fact that he
100%.
was even standing out there
Right.
trying to coach his team is insane.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm not expecting him now to make like split second decisions and be on top of that, right?
Right.
So I'm gonna lay off that stuff. Um, but yeah, I think you know Miami absolutely deserve credit for the way that they finished off
Right.
Milwaukee, and I
Right.
could see because of their culture, I could even see them taking Giannis sitting out game three as disrespect,
Right.
right? It was kind of like you know they didn't say it, but it was like when the Raptors tied the Cavs 2-2 and LeBron was like, I've been in adverse situations before, this is not one of them, right?
Right. Right.
So the Bucks in that situation 1-1 going into game 3, they were basically like, hey, we're not worried about going down 2-1.
Yeah. We've
And
been
then
through
Jimmy was
this.
probably like, oh, you're not worried.
And then he did his thing. Yeah, that team, like the fact that they lost Tyler Heroes and they're still doing this with like a Gabe Vincent, a Strauss, and like of course Kyle just doing Kyle things. And like with Bam, I always feel like people want more of him, and I feel like he doesn't really deliver what we want from him or what we expect. I think people want to see a 20 and 10 guy like consistently, or like a 25 and 10 guy. But playoff
Yeah.
time with no Tyler, you're expecting a 25-point type of guy, but he doesn't give you that night to night at all.
Yeah. No. And, when you look at bigs in the league who give it to you night to night, they're so rare, right?
So right now,
It's Jokic, it's Embiid. I mean, even right now in the playoffs night to night, AD isn't giving it to you night to
not at
night,
all. No,
right? You don't know which one you're going to get.
you really don't.
So, um, I think Bam, again, it's this conversation of like, hey, can you just be happy with the player he is versus, okay, maybe there's this expectation because at the end of the day, we all put hierarchies on teams, right?
Right,
And so it's like, hey, Jimmy's in the number one role.
right,
He's absolutely doing number one things.
right,
Bam, you're number two. So you're in that role. We don't
right,
care if you're good enough or whatever. You're in that role. So
right,
we need to see you do number two things.
right.
And that's not happening. And that's kind of how the narrative goes sometimes, which can be a bit unfair. Um, but yeah, I think Bam is like in that tier below those top names that I mentioned. Like you
Right,
could probably put them in the same category as like a Jaren Jackson Jr., as like a Brook Lopez, or whatever it is, right?
right.
Um, and realistically, if all those guys, if they're like the third best player on your team,
You're pretty good.
then it's great, right?
Right,
Like Brook Lopez has that perfect situation, right?
right,
Like Middleton's the number 2 scorer. You got Drew after that, and then you got so Brook is in like the perfect situation.
Yeah,
That's why you're able to just love his defense, right?
yeah.
If Bam was the third or fourth best player on his team, then no one would have any issues with him.
We'd be loving his defense right now, which is pretty crazy with them. That's why like I believe in that team a lot, a lot, a lot. And then I think the team, like we've talked about them a couple times, that is a team we don't talk about. This Denver Nuggets, they can win it all, and we didn't like. I don't feel like we gave them the respect. Jokic got the respect. Then the straw poll came out, and he himself looked like he's like, I don't want to win the third MVP. Even I don't want to win it. And
Yeah.
like, it's this team is so good. And a trade that I've always been willing to see is, and going back to the Raptors, and I know some people would disagree, it's like an OG for like Michael Porter Jr. and someone else because of his health issue with Michael Porter Jr. But I always, like I said, the Chris Middleton thing, his ability to score is elite. He just hasn't shown it yet. But he has an
Right.
ability to score, which is very elite, that I think the Raptors would need. But yeah, like this Denver Nuggets team, like we're not talking about them enough.
No, man, they are awesome. And like, you even look at the question to KD when someone is asking like, "Hey, were you surprised by the Nuggets?" He's like, "This is the number 1 team.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
won the Western Conference." Like,
yeah,
um, of course I'm not surprised. And so, like, yeah, you got the 2-time MVP in Jokic. You got, obviously Jamal struggled in game 2, but you saw what he's really capable of in game 1.
right,
And that's a situation where I think Michael Porter Jr. has it perfect for him, right? Where it's like he can play behind those 2 guys, and get all the quality shots in the world.
right,
And then Aaron Gordon, same boat, right? Like, here's a guy in Orlando, you put all these expectations on him, right?
right,
And he's
right,
putting expectations on himself, but you put him in the
right.
right situation, and now you can just appreciate him for
Exploit his
exactly who he
value.
is.
Exploit
Yeah,
his value. He was scoring what, close to 20 points a game with Orlando, being the number 1 or 2 guy. Now he's in Denver, the 4th guy. Like
yeah,
that's really good.
yeah. So I think that's just a well-oiled machine. I think you're seeing, beyond Denver just like playing better than the Suns so far. Like, part of that is that chemistry, right?
Right,
The fact that you've been through battles before together, right?
right.
And you've experienced all these things. I think the Suns, what are they, 16 games together
Yeah.
with,
Yeah. More
with
than the
KD?
Brooklyn Nets, which is hilarious, but yeah.
So I think that is a tough thing to overcome.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it's a good thing for the league,
Right.
because if the Suns were to go on and win the championship,
The super
it
teams
would
again.
complete it would completely destroy the value of the regular season.
Right. Right.
Because if you're now saying that a team that played 8 games together in the regular season was able to put it together and win a championship, like, who cares
Right.
about the regular season? You
Right.
know what I mean?
Right. That's
Load
why
manage, do this, do that. Like, hey, as long as we're healthy for the playoffs, who cares? You know?
that's where it's funny you say that because like I always thought to myself, if we get a Miami and Lakers again, isn't that saying that the whole playoffs and like earning a spot really doesn't matter? Because you have 2 people who barely made it through the play-in. Well, Lakers did, but the Heat didn't. And it's like, wow, like they really didn't have to care about the playoffs at all. Where my Milwaukee cared a little bit, and look at them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the one thing I will say is, with Miami, like, their culture is so strong and their
Yeah,
identity is strong. Like, at the end of the day, like, it's not like Jimmy is playing with Bam for the first time. It's
right,
not like Jimmy's playing with Harrow for the first time. Obviously,
right,
Harrow was out. Kyle was there last year. Like,
right.
there is that continuity. So I think from that standpoint, it's like
That's true.
you need some level of continuity, right? Like, LeBron is familiar with AD and, you know, stuff like that. So I think to that extent it matters. And so, we'll see how it plays out with Phoenix, but I love Denver. I love watching them play. Like, you can't not enjoy watching like the 2-man game between Jamal and Jokic.
Right.
That's just
Agree.
beautiful basketball.
That team is just it's just I think you have guys like KCP, Brown, Braun, like you have all these guys who just fit each other. They everyone it's a hierarchy. I always say like organization matters. Like when everyone kind of knows what they're doing, it just matters. But my last question to you, Vivek, is who are you taking? The Warriors or the Lakers, and how many games? Because this is this series that people are going to talk about the most, that people want to see. Who are you taking?
um, this might surprise people. I'm gonna take the Warriors in a very competitive 5 games.
5 games?
Yeah.
That that's woo, that five
I
games.
and like I would if the Lakers had a home court, I'd probably say 6,
Yeah,
but like I could very easily see the Warriors taking care of business at home, getting one on the road, and then just finishing business in game 5.
right.
That's where like obviously the home court advantage makes a difference. And I honestly think the Kings were really, really good. And like if you were to take away the label of a first round, if you
Yeah,
happen to just watch that basketball
yeah,
being played in the West Finals,
yeah.
you would be like, that was
Amazing.
one of the best like West Finals ever.
Right, right,
And so
right.
I think they got through a really, really tough series. And I actually think they will be very well equipped to deal with the Lakers because I think Draymond knows AD in and out.
He does.
And so uh, he'll bring a level of physicality to him. There'll be Kevon Looney ready inside. You look at in terms of options on the perimeter, you got both Clay and Wiggins who can go at
Right.
LeBron. And so I think they just match up better than the Grizz did. And they're the champs, man.
It's hard to because I really want the Lakers to win. I'm not gonna lie, I really do. But it's so hard to kind of go against them because if Steph is in this like mojo right now that he's honestly been
Man.
on for the past few years, that he's just like like he's playing as if he needs more respect or he needs more rings because the 2 rings that he got with KD just it's like his brain is like I don't even count those anymore. I need to get more because those 2 don't count, right? So it's like he's even going a little bit harder. When it comes to the Lakers, I keep thinking they need a Kuzma type who I feel can actually get like 16 points a game, but
I
that
mean,
third
how
guy
much would they love to have KCP right now?
right? Like they really need someone who you can trust. And I think Austin Reeves is great, but I don't know. Like it's his first time, so we have to see more. D'Angelo Russell, he'll have a
Yeah.
game that he's going to score 30 points. It's the inevitable. He's going to score it, but then the rest of the whatever games, what is he going to give you? Schroeder, I think, is like their third best guy more consistently, and he still comes off the bench. So like I feel like the Lakers have more depth, but it's the Warriors. I think that the biggest thing is AD has to give you 30 points a game. Has to. Like this potentially giving you 15 points a game. No, LeBron can give you 20. It's not the same, or 25. His impact is not the same unless LeBron's giving you like 15 assists. Then his
Yeah.
impact is really there. But AD has to dominate. Warriors in 5 is a crazy choice. I can't believe but it's good. Before I let you go, Vivek, for those who haven't heard of Vivek or seen his work, please tell us your next work and what do you have coming up?
Yeah, just staying on top of the off season. With Raptors.com, like I'm not allowed to speculate.
Yeah,
That's just part of the deal with like actually writing for the team.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you won't see, any of that stuff about like who might the Raptors sign in free agency or all that stuff. But we'll be staying on top of like the team and what it's doing. And they have some stuff, some activities planned for May. So I might be, covering that and just keeping you in the loop on what's going on with the team that way.
right.
And then, once we get closer to, uh, you know, the draft lottery and get closer to hiring a new coach and all of that, I'll be on top of all of that. So you can look out for that on Raptors.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Vivek M. Jacob.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much, Vivek. I really appreciate it. That's Those Guys Sports. Great, great, great conversation with Vivek. Check it out. Like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys again. Peace.